You done? Thank you, Senator West. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, you started your presentation with some very impressive data on student achievement. Our dropout rate is improving, and in so many areas our student achievement is improving. I want to drill down on a couple of things that have already been discussed. And you enumerated those tests. I go back to the old TEAMS test when all this started, and I distinctly remember why we did it. George Bush was our governor, and there was a huge concern about social promotion, that we were seeing children drop out of school in 9th grade because they couldn't read, and if you back up, they got past, 3rd grade, 5th grade without learning how to read. That was the biggest factor in our dropout rate. And we all asked, what can we do? And one of the things that was determined is you've got to make sure these kids aren't going from one grade to the next without meeting minimum skills. And that was the first minimum skills test. And boy, I've watched it just grow and grow and grow. And so a couple of my questions. First of all, I am concerned about not just the amount of time we're spending testing these children, and I'm sure you've heard that concern, but the amount of money we're spending. Can you tell us how much we're spending to fund testing in Senate Bill 1 compared to, I don't know, I'm thinking of some kind of trend line that would show over the past few budget cycles, how much are we spending on testing? I mean, I'm guessing that the growth line is going up significantly, but I'm just guessing that.
I mean, there's no doubt that the $468 million is greater than what we spent under the 2 iterations of accountability programs that we've had in the state. Mm-hmm. In part because we have more tests, in part because we have more students. Mm-hmm. The presentation earlier about the enrollment growth indicates that we'll have more kids. I'm almost fearful to say, but last year we gave 8 million tests in the state.
Is that too many, Commissioner?
I think you ought to be enormously proud of what you've done in terms of STAR. Mm-hmm. Because you've done 2 real basic things. You said there is that body of knowledge we want youngsters to be able to manage and master by the time he or she shakes the superintendent's hand on Saturday. And you've also said that you want us to focus on every kid in every classroom, mm-hmm. in every school, in every district across the state. There's going to be a conversation here about whether you maintain the 4x4 intact. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me, in the conversations that I've had, obviously the new kid on the block, but in the conversations I've had, kid ought to have 4 years of rigor in language arts. Mm-hmm. They ought to be able to write something other than 140-character text. A youngster needs 4 years of rigor in math, and does it have to be Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry? Perhaps not. Mm-hmm. But maybe that youngster who wants to take the career tech course is going to take construction geometry or some other math course. In the world that we live in, I think it's probably helpful to have 4 years of rigor in science. Mm-hmm.
But Commissioner, I don't disagree with any of that, but are we testing these kids too much?
There ought we measure what we treasure. Mm-hmm. And should all 15 of them count? So I think they ought to take them. And should they all count towards graduation? Perhaps not. Perhaps not.
Right now, that isn't even my question. My question is, are we testing them too much? And are we spending too much money? Has the growth, the trend line, and how much money we're spending on tests, and I'm a big accountability person, and I'm a big high standards person, but we're testing these children too much, in my opinion. Let me go on. We're not going to solve that problem today. We talked earlier about grants, and I'm going to ask you, of the grant programs that went unfunded last session, can you quantify how much of those were funded in the 2009 session using stimulus money?
I'll have to get back with you.
I'd love to know that. I didn't expect an answer to that today. And one final question. We talked earlier about some crossover funding, and I'm very interested, as you well know, in student health and physical fitness and nutrition. And I'd love to know how much money we are investing in student health, fitness, and nutrition in Article 3. And you can get back with me on that,
Will do.
but if anything comes to
Will
mind,
do.
I think it's very important to know, from what I understand, we are not funding in the base bill some very important programs, in my opinion, and I'd like to know what we're funding and not funding in those areas, as compared to the last budget
Will
cycle.
do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.